Hey, Adrian.
Hi.
I got your email. Yes, I'm recording it. I was just trying to get everything lined up, so I couldn't respond right away.
Oh, perfect. Yes, thank you.
No problem. Can somebody let me know if they can hear the music in the background?
Can hear it.
Okay. Trying to give you some like afternoon warm up joining music.
Love it. Thank you.
No problem.
Hey Jesse, how's it going?
Hey, what's going on?
Not much.
Trying to exit out all these screens I got going on. Welcome everybody who's coming on in. Thanks for joining. Come on in, get comfortable. Come on in. Welcome, welcome, welcome. We're gonna give people a little bit of time to jump in, get settled. Hopefully you are eating something or grabbing something to eat. I won't feel offended if you do. I already ate because I figured we would be together for a little bit. Paige or Adrian, do we want to wait until like 12:05 or you tell me how long we want to wait?
12:05 sounds good.
Okay, cool.
Thank you.
No problem, no problem. Well, while we're waiting, anybody want to come off mute and tell us something interesting about their morning so far? Everybody's boring. Okay.
I just Bowflex bike and took it on my first ride.
Okay. All right.
That was cool.
No problems.
No, I just I'm out of shape, so hence my.
That's what's up. So I need a new seat on my bike, and I was supposed to go yesterday. Didn't leave the house. And knew the whole time. I was like, oh, I should go now. Oh, I'll go later. Nope. Didn't even bother.
You're among friends. Story of my life.
Yeah. So then I didn't work out this morning. So I was like, yep, it's whatever.
My kids woke up at 4 a.m.
Oh, man. Like, that's not a normal thing, right?
No, usually it's at least 5:30. This morning was bad.
Okay. How old are they?
One just turned 4 over the weekend, and another one's about to turn 2 next month. So, yeah.
Good luck with that. I was up at 4. I usually get up at the crack of dawn, but My youngest, now he's pushing it back, but he would get up at 6:30 if he like could, but we make him stay in bed until like 7:15, and that's like late for him. Everybody else doesn't want to get up until like 10, so somehow it works out. But yeah, I was up at 4. I usually get up at like 3, for no reason. I know. Don't judge me. All right.
Well, I think we could probably get started, Jesse, if you'd like.
Yep. It's perfect. All right. Well, welcome. My name is Jesse Ross. I am super grateful to be with you all. I know we have some folks here in the Twin Cities and maybe some folks that are spread out. I'm going to give you some information. And hope that it's not hope. I know that it's going to be somewhat applicable, but I want you to take what you can, leave the rest, but try to focus on who you are. So a little bit about me, because we don't have time to go through everybody. I'm in Minneapolis. I have 5 kids, which is what I was kind of telling you. I have my oldest daughter is going to college. She's going to Augsburg University. On Friday is move-in day. I have a 9th grade boy, 8th grade boy, 4th grade girl, and 2nd grade boy. So all the way from 18 down to 7. Yep, crazy. And my wife still loves me for some reason. So I'm from the Twin Cities, have been doing training and cultural work and diversity, equity, inclusion, all types of stuff for probably the last, for real, like it's been at least 15 years, but then working for myself for probably about 5 or 6 now. And I enjoy doing these. I enjoy meeting people. I enjoy talking about life, especially when it comes to the diversity, equity, inclusion side, because it really actually drives our business if you really think about it. So typically these conversations, you may have experienced people giving you a ton of data, and that is not my forte. So don't worry. I am a type of person that likes to ask questions. So there will be a point where I'm gonna ask you to write down some stuff and I'm gonna ask you to share. I will ask you to interact in the chat a ton, but I also want you to feel free to just post stuff in the chat as well as as much as you want to. And I will do my best to pause, ask for you to ask questions, but I do like the question and answer. So I'm gonna ask you a question and I will pause and be like, hey, this is your turn. So if you thought that this was going to be one of those presentations you're going to fall asleep on, sorry, not going to happen. And what else do you need to know about me? Yeah, I think that's it. Are there any questions? Oh, and use the hand raise feature, please, because that just helps me. But are there any questions before we start? Anybody got any questions before we start? Just kind of going through. Shout out to the 10 to 20 people who are on video. Thank you so much. So I can see real people. Thank you so much.
How do you
all right.
do the hand raise thing?
Oh, you said, how do you use it?
Yeah.
If you go to participants,
Mm-hmm.
I could be lying to you because I just realized my screen might look different.
Oh, I see it.
Okay. Thank you. I was like, I hope that's what it is. And if not, just throw it in the chat. I'll do my best to check the chat.
Cool.
That was a really good question. Any other questions? We just got a notification that Amazon has some stuff coming. All right, well, I'm gonna share my screen. We'll get started. Yo, this is me like on a regular basis. I'm pretty confident that I should have been diagnosed with like ADHD or short attention deficit something. So you just got to deal with it. Trust me, I'm okay as long as you're okay and my family's okay. But we're gonna get started. This workshop is called Cultural Self-Awareness as a Tool for Effective Change. Part of the reason why I started doing the work that I did is I realized in some aspects I was working in companies. I was the only Black person. I was the youngest. I was the only person who got tired of hearing those like terrible professional development workshops where the person really just read off the screen and you could have just like printed it out and did it yourself on your own time. So I designed these to be as interactive as possible. Again, I'm going to ask you to come off mute, but also because we live in this world where we have become inundated with data, we have become bombarded with so much information that we don't even want, right? And then we have, to some degree, have been shamed around like not doing enough, not knowing enough. I'm looking at a lot of people that are on here, and a lot of you are white, which is okay. Hopefully that is like okay for you. But people get so caught into like race, ethnicity, talent, skills, gender, economics, socioeconomics, and really, I just want to have a conversation about what can we do internally, like individually, what can we do, and then as we learn and develop our own method and figure out what we can do individually, then we figure out what we can do as a company. So again, cultural self-awareness. If you want my info, we'll get it to you later, don't worry. But let's dive into it. So here's what I would love for you to do. Now, typically, I want you to break out into groups, but I have learned that sometimes Zoom acts like its own person, and the breakout rooms may or may not work. Instead of doing that, how about we just go around? And I want you to define these words in your own definition. So in your own definition, I want you to define diversity, inclusion, cultural competency, equity, and you cannot research, you do not look up on Google. I just want you to tell me what comes to mind when you think about the word or these words. So let's start with diversity. Anybody willing to just jump off mute, share what comes to mind when you think about diversity? It's always trying to figure out the breaks.
Socioeconomic status?
Okay, there you go. I see Greg.
Appearances.
Okay, thank you. I thought I saw Cece.
Sorry. There we go. Now I got it. Like different environments.
Yep, okay.
I was going to say a wide variety.
There you go. Okay,
Representation.
okay. Anything else?
The cultural differences.
Yep,
Perspectives.
okay.
Language and like accent.
Yep. Love that. Anybody else got anything differently?
Physical ability.
Physical ability, yeah. Okay. All right, those are good. Good way to start. Thanks for not making this awkward. Appreciate y'all. Inclusion. What about inclusion? What comes to mind when you hear inclusion?
Like equal opportunity to hear one's thoughts.
Absolutely.
Accessibility.
Yep.
Seeking out the thoughts from people who may not be willing to share.
Yeah, definitely.
I think making people who would otherwise feel othered feel welcome, included, and invited.
Absolutely.
Acknowledging differences.
Yeah, for sure. Anybody else?
I like to say that I think there are people in different stages of life too, to be opening and understanding to the sort of stages of life.
Absolutely. Thank you. Thank you. What about cultural competency? What comes to mind when you think about cultural competency?
Like understanding nuances of someone else's culture.
Yep, love that.
Respect.
Yes. Did you want to say more? Or you want to leave it right there?
I'm gonna leave it right there.
Okay. Thank you.
Awareness.
Okay.
Willingness to be open and continue to learn and not assume that you understand everything right off the bat.
Yeah, love that.
Acknowledging biases.
Love it.
Gaining an understanding.
Love it.
I think acknowledging too that like culture isn't just these big groups. It can also be smaller groups. So we have our own culture, and how do you navigate within that?
Yeah. Dope. Anybody else?
To echo up what he just said, in like I think to add on it, I might be repeating him, but intersectionality. So all of the different attributes and being aware that people have many parts that affect each individual differently.
Yeah. I'll use that word intersectionality a lot too. So thank you. Anybody else? Okay. What about equity? We hear this word a lot.
I would say giving people the same access to resources and opportunities.
Yep. Thank you.
Being impartial.
Yeah.
Understanding inequities to remove those barriers.
Okay. Love that. Anybody else? Got it. Okay, cool. Give me a second to stop sharing. I just realized that there's one part that I did not add, and I told you I'm a little special. So thank you. Those are all good. There's no one particular definition that's right or wrong. What I love to do is help people understand how to, like, we all hear our own definitions. We've all experienced some of these words, whether we've known, directly or indirectly. And so it's always good to know like what's in the room and what people are used to hearing. And then for our conversation, we'll kind of ground ourselves around these definitions. Again, there was no necessarily right or wrong, but when we talk about diversity, we'll talk about the who. So who we count, the presence of difference, the mix. So right now we have a diverse group of people that are on here, a diverse group of people that work in our company. Inclusion is the what. So the who counts, leveraging difference, result of the mix working together. So inclusion is this mix trying to figure out how do we make this work, and can we work, not just work together, but work well. Cultural competency is the how, usually around like skills or behaviors that are used to achieve goals, that practical application, and then developmental. So it's something that we continually learn, almost like when people talk about like working out or muscles or whatever, it's like something that you continue to work and you hopefully build some type of memory, but also you grow it as time goes on. And then equity, we'll talk a little bit more about like on the systemic outcome side, which cannot predetermine success based on who you count. I think a lot of people have this misconception that, oh, we just do this, and then we're good. And so those are kind of the definitions of where we're going to ground ourselves. Again, we won't necessarily dive too deep into the definitions particularly, but I just wanted you to know what I'm talking about as we continue to dive into this. So diversity typically creates what I like to call like this mix. So here's what this looks like. To make change for equity and inclusion, intercultural competency is something that is important and something that I've kind of stressed out. And I've even kind of shifted it away from competency to intelligence, because a lot of people talk about, EQ, IQ. It's like, what is your intercultural intelligence? Because there's a lot of people who are competent to drive, right? People can, people get their license all the time, but there's a lot of people who do not actually know how to drive. My daughter, like 2 weeks ago, very randomly asked me, she said, Daddy, if you thought that you were, if you did not know you were being watched or tested, do you think you would still pass a driver's test? And I was like, absolutely. And in my mind, I'm like, I was just texting while I was driving. Terrible. And so just that point of like making sure that we understand. So I'm going to talk a lot about self-awareness today, but most times we get inundated with other awareness. So again, the data, the facts, the statistics, other people's stories, news. Every now and then we get inundated with some of the behavioral adaptation. But I want to talk about self-awareness because I believe any way that we're going to shift and move the needle and move things has to come from individual first. Then we can go into how do we, once we address who we are, we can address what our behaviors are like and start to move those and start to pay attention to those. And then we start to pay attention to the other awareness. So it's going to be a little counter cultural, probably compared to what you're used to, but that's kind of my MO. I'm not really used to doing things how people are used to doing them. So, so just as a, you know, I guess you could put in the chat you could put number 1. Can anybody, or what's your capacity to do these problems? Like if you can do these, just go ahead and throw a 1 in the chat. Let me know. I would like you to come off mute, but no, everybody doesn't have to come off mute. Typically, I get a pretty good response from this, so I'll just trust that you are, yep, okay, there we go. The chat works. That was a test, but thank you very much. All right, capacity to do this is pretty high. Got it. I can do it. 1, 1, 1. All right. Now here's the test. What's your capacity to do this? Can you type a 2 if you are a math guru and are able to do these problems? There's always a few, but there's usually 0. Love it. -1. Thank you. Thank you so much. My -1s and my 0s, I'm with you. Got it. Okay. All right. So here's the thing. Here's why I use this graph. Typically, people like to assume that diversity, equity, inclusion looks like this. Everybody should have the capacity to do it. Everybody has learned how to do this a long time ago. It's pretty easy. All you have to do is add these numbers times this, and then you're good. It's basic stuff. But really what diversity and cultural competency calls for is this. You gotta, it's challenging. It's a little more challenging. It's not necessarily basic. I used to have a sophomore geometry, algebra, he might've taught me all types of things, named Mr. Cowles, who told me a long time ago, I would do problems, right? I'd be in there and I'd finish my work and I'd be done. But he was like, yo, Jess, you gotta be able to show your work. And I didn't understand what the importance of showing my work was. For me, it was like, yo, I got the answer right. Why don't you just leave me alone? I just wanna go talk to this cute girl. But what he was trying to emphasize was it wasn't necessarily about me getting it right. It was about, well, one, it was about me getting it right, but it was also, can I show how I got there? Because if someone ran into problems, or if I needed to teach somebody or needed to walk somebody through it, I needed to know how to do it and what were the steps. And as we're in this world right now, I mean, just August of 2020, but also like living in Minneapolis in general, we have to understand not only how to get to the correct answer, and there may not always be a correct answer, but we got to show how we do that. We got to show how we move the needle. We got to show people and bring people along. And so the one thing that I love about doing this is there's no dumb question. There's no, you should be here, you should know that. It's like, you know, we all come with our own understanding, and now let's figure out how we can grow and develop and expand beyond that. So for my 2s, thank you so much. So here's what this looks like when it all works together, right? When diversity, equity, or intercultural competency, inclusion work together, people end up having a more extensive vocabulary. We create space for conversations. We get to attract and retain more diverse talent. There's a greater comfort with self-identities, and then greater capacity to navigate and effectively bridge cultural differences. It's the result of the mix working together, but this is how it works together. Now, selfishly, I want to show you this again because you have no idea how long it took me to put this together and get these wheels to turn. So I just always have to stop and show this again because this is the level of my PowerPoint abilities. This is as deep as you're going to get. So I just want to make sure you get to appreciate that. So, all right. So we're going to focus on cultural self-awareness today. So here are 3 questions that I want to ask you, and you don't necessarily have to show them or say them out loud, but I want you to kind of ground. If you're taking notes, here's a good spot to kind of take notes. 3 questions that I always ask people, no matter where we go, but definitely around this context. What is your role? So some of you have different roles. Some of you may, you know, you have a role at your actual job at the company, but you also have a role in your community. You have a role in your family. You have a role in your family structure. You have a role with the degrees that you studied or whatever that is. But deeper than that, what is your role in creating communities that you can be proud of? What is your role in creating communities that you can be proud of? Second question, what is your goal? So based on your position, based on your role, we all have some sort of goal. As a father, I want my children to grow up, be successful, to not have to, necessarily want for anything, want them to have everything that they need. But as a community member, I also want to be supportive and connected to the people in my neighborhood. As a facilitator, as a workshop, I want to add value and give life to people. So what is your goal? What will be better or different because you exist? What will be better or different because you exist? And then the last question is a little bit deeper, but I hope that people resonate with this question. How is your soul? And now I know this is an odd question, but it's something that I think is important, because when you ask the question, how is your soul, you're really getting at the people work that should be done in alignment with your values. And your values should resonate with how your soul is. So for me, my 3 core values are integrity, transparency, and relationships. So I have to be me, like that's me all day. I have to be pretty transparent. I'm wide open. Sometimes my wife hates that. But I'm big on relationships. I'm big on making sure that we have a connection, that we have a vibe, that you feel like this is a mutual relationship. So again, 3 questions. What is your role in creating communities that you can be proud of? What is your goal? What will be different or better because you exist? And then how is your soul? Again, this is the work that should be done in alignment with your values. I want you to think about those, because I'm going to come back to them later as we kind of dive into this. But these are 3 things that I feel like should lead this work and should lead you in how you do your work. All right, identity. Here's something about the impact of culture and community as it relates to identity. So 3 things that are always important and always exist. Identity is always present, culture always matters, and there are multiple choices. Again, identity is always present, culture always matters, and there are multiple choices. I'm gonna do an exercise in a second about that, but just want to make sure you eat that. So here's what I would love you to do. We have I have 6 photos that I have on the screen, and right here we have what we would call some protesters. Right here at the top we have Black Lives Matter. Over here to the right we have the Me Too movement. Down the bottom right we have peace sign. So let's just say harmony, love. In the middle bottom you have no wall, no ban. And then to the bottom left, we have all gender restroom. So I'm not going to ask you this question in this context, what do you do? My first question, I want you to use the chat. How many of you all identify with at least one of these photos? If you identify with at least one, can you throw 1 in the chat for me? If you identify with at least one, throw 1 in the chat. Gotcha. Thank you, thank you, thank you. All right, how many of you identify with at least 2? Throw 2 in the chat. Okay, what about 3? Throw 3 in the chat. Okay, that's a lot of people, got it. 4? Okay. A lot of 4s. All right, what about 5? Nice, okay, okay. Anybody 6? Okay, got it. All right, it's a lot of people. Thank you for participating, appreciate that. All right, so I would love for maybe a few people who put in 5 and 6. If you put down 5 or 6, would you mind coming off mute and explaining either how or why? You don't have to give too many details, but I'm just curious how you identify with all 5 or 6.
I'll go off mute. I don't really know how to go in depth on how I identify with all 6. I don't actively protest, but I donate money to support people who do protest.
Yep.
Black Lives Matter is something I feel strongly about. Me Too movement. I think we all know people that have been affected adversely by the things that these movements are trying to combat. So I don't know, just seems like a cultural tenet in life. The all gender restroom thing. I know many transgendered people, and I've seen that. I have had friends who have been beaten up. I know my family's immigrants, and I don't know. And there you go.
Yeah. No, thank you. I appreciate you sharing that. Anybody else? And I'm not looking for anything specific, so don't worry. Don't feel pressured.
Hi. I feel like all of these photos represent the struggle and the fight for equality and giving rights and equality to marginalized groups and groups that have been unfairly oppressed. So that's important to me across the board, no matter who it is.
Love that. Thank you. And maybe one more. One more person want to share?
The types of organizations I like to support are also trying to create progress with all of these movements.
Love that. Thank you. Thank you all for sharing. And I'm sure if we were able to dive into everybody's numbers, there would be a reason why, whether you chose 1 or 6. What I think sometimes I would say the past affiliations to these used to be you had to personally have some type of connection, right? So you had to, people felt like they had to be a protester or believe in protesting in order to support what they were doing, or you had to be affected, as you know, with the all gender restroom situations or kind of that issue where instead of having to have a personal experience, you can identify with these in whatever way possible. And I think that starts us on the journey of understanding how to grow our cultural competency. And also it helps us think, what would I do in this situation? When you have some type of personal connection, again, identity is always present, culture always matters, and there are multiple choices. Sometimes we have to pick one or the other. Sometimes we are only seen or identify with only one of these photos at like face value, but deep down inside, we're all connected. And that's where the intersectionality comes in. And so I appreciate you all sharing. I also think it's part of our culture, right? We have been understanding and seeing, especially if you live in Minneapolis or are connected to Minneapolis in some way, there are facets of culture that happen, and those particular photos have become something that people here in Minneapolis have definitely paid attention to, but I would say across the world, across the globe. So here's what culture looks like. Basically, if you boil it down, there's the shared patterns. They are used to make meaning, and they determine what's in, what's out, what's appropriate, what's not. A easier way of defining what culture is, it's just the way that we do things around here. Now, you've all seen the iceberg analogy and photo used in different aspects. So there's a lot of things that we see on top of the water, which is like objective, and then there's a lot of subjective things that are under the water. So I'm going to dive into those a little bit so that we can kind of put this together. So typically, outside of our primary awareness, right, we have things like food, clothing, traditional dances, cultural symbols, language, fine arts, all these different things that you see, right? You can see that I'm Black. I'm probably the darkest person on this call, and that's okay. But I have tattoos. And so sometimes those are symbols, right? Sometimes those are things that we can see outwardly, depending on if we decide to show them. But then there's tons of things that are out of our awareness that we miss or sometimes are not even able to connect with. And that's not necessarily anybody's fault, but it's things we have to start paying attention to. So some of the things related to culture that are out of our awareness: incentives to work, notions of leadership, facial expressions, attitudes towards the dependent, patterns of communication, nature of friendship, concepts of justice, concepts of cleanliness, patterns of handling emotion, body language, eye behavior, so many different things. And then I put down there the roles, status by age, sex, class, occupation, kinship. There's so many things that are part of our awareness or part of our culture, that are out of our awareness that play such a role in how we see culture, view culture, and experience culture. So let me just give you an example for a few of them. If you haven't noticed, again, I know I'm dark and I've been okay with it, don't worry about it, but I have very thick eyebrows and I tend to make this face a ton, right? Doesn't matter if I have glasses on or not, I just tend to make this face. In my world, it's the inquisitive face. It's the, tell me more. My wife hates that face because she doesn't like to be criticized. Now, there's a lot of things that come from being criticized that are part of her culture, right? Growing up, I think there's one that says patterns of handling conflict. In my world, growing up, my parents are from Mississippi, so they're from the South, and they talk really, really, really fast. I mean, my dad, he can go with the best of them. He sounds like a mix of like a Tasmanian devil and like Elmer Fudd. Like, I don't know how you get that mix, but he's super. And growing up, nobody understood what the heck he would say except me, because I live with him. I get it. I pick up on it. But at my dinner table, right, if you had an idea, part of the way I grew up, if you had an idea, it was basically throw it out there, throw it on the table, and you better be able to defend it. If you can't defend why you want to go to the high school dance, why you should get a job, why you want to work at this person, why you want to hang out with this person. If you can't defend whatever you feel like you should have, the right that you should have or privilege you should have, if you can't defend it, then you can't get it. And so conflict, tension, that was part of my makeup. That's how I grew up. Now you throw my wife into play. My wife grew up in a household where they didn't talk about nothing. And I mean nothing. It was like, oh, you don't like me? Oh, you got a problem with what I did and how I said it? I'm not even having that conversation. And so because they didn't talk about things and because I love to talk about things, when we got together, we would have like a few little mishaps and I'd be like, cool, let's talk about it. And she would shut down because that was her pattern, right? That was her culture that she came from. So you can imagine we've been married for 4 years. So it's taken a while, but we're getting there, right? To the point of being able to understand how other culture. Also, ordering of time. So growing up for me, and I don't know if you've ever heard this term, but there was this thing I grew up on called CP time. CP time stood for colored people time, which basically meant that all Black folks, all colored people were late. Now, this is a terrible like stereotype, but my dad was always late to everything. I mean, my basketball game, church, school, his job, it didn't matter. He was always late to everything. So because that was the culture I grew up in, every clock in my house, 15 minutes fast. No lie. I hate to be late. I have left my family, literally, half of my family, I've left them at home on our way to church. We got 2 cars, but I'm like, yo, I'm leaving at 9:50 because we live 5 minutes away from church. I feel like that gives us enough time to find a parking spot, get in there, and then church starts at 10. Let's go. But for my wife, who moves really slow, she learned and it works, right? So I'm just giving you some examples of me, and I'm definitely not promoting leave your wife, leave your spouse, leave your significant other. I'm not saying that. Please do not go home and say Jesse Ross said that. But I am saying that there are some of these patterns and things that are part of our culture that are out of our awareness if you don't pay attention to them. And they don't necessarily describe or define you, but what happens when you are working with someone who has a completely different pattern of decision making? What happens when you're working closely with someone who has a different pattern of problem solving? Just saying. So we got to think about these things, and a lot of times we just think, oh, it's a personality issue. Oh, it's because you're from this area and I'm from this area. No, there's a lot of things related to culture that are connected to how we make decisions, how we structure time, how we do our work, how we feel like people should be promoted or not, how we communicate. Some of you on here prefer really long emails. I love you, but I don't like you because I don't like really long emails. I'm like, yo, get to the point, or you could have just called me and before COVID, you could have just walked over and we could have had that whole conversation. But this is just the reality that we live in, and we have to pay attention to it, right? If you're still following me and you haven't fallen asleep, just do me a favor and type 1 in the chat to make sure you're still paying attention. All right, thank you. Appreciate you. Okay, so someone asked the question, and you haven't said it out loud, but I know you're thinking this. Where do we get our culture from? So you learn it from your people. So here's how it starts. It starts with where you grew up, right? So we all were born somewhere in some place. It could have been in a major, it could have been down south, it could have been over north, it could have been across overseas. It doesn't matter. You were born somewhere. And then your first exposure was to the family that you were connected to, right? Who was in your house and their expectations. So there were certain expectations that were put upon you, whether it was be a straight A student or just don't go to jail. There were some things that were expected of you. You got chores, you don't have chores, you get an allowance, you don't have allowance, be home when the street lights come on, whatever. Then you go to neighborhood norms. So there are things that were happening in your neighborhood that people were doing, that people were a part of, that you kind of adjusted to it, right? And then there's broader community expectations. So you get outside your neighborhood, but you're connected to maybe the YMCA, or you play traveling sports, or you're part of the debate team, or you go to like a summer camp somewhere, or you go fishing. I don't know. There are different broader community expectations that were just bestowed upon you. And then there are subcultures that are connected that relate to some of those photos that I put up, right? So you may identify with the Me Too movement, or you may go to college and be part of some association. You may have a religious affiliation or background. You may join a sorority or a fraternity. There's all these different things that you're connected to. Institutions, right? There's so many different things that we're connected to, but this is how we learn culture subjectively. It's instilled in us literally from birth. And again, the problem isn't necessarily that you view something differently than I view it. It's you have a whole different concept of something that I have a different concept of. And so now we've met, now we either met on good terms or not on good terms, or we're stuck in this community, or now I have to be on this team with you and I didn't necessarily get to pick you, you didn't pick me, but we're here. Now we have to figure out how to make this thing work as best as possible when we both, I believe, mean well, right? We intend to mean well. So, all right, here's the part where I'm going to ask you to participate. I hope you got something to write. Making a sandwich with one. Thanks, man. I appreciate the honesty. I love the chat. Okay, so I need you to grab something to write, and you can even just use your phone. But here are aspects of your identity. The exercise that I would like you to do is I want you to pick five aspects of your identity. So I put up a list right here, and I'm going to keep this on. I put up a list, but I want you to pick 5 aspects of your identity that you connect with. So if you select age, here's the thing. I don't want you to just put age. I want you to either put your age or the generation that you're connected to. If you say education, it could be your major. It could be the institution that you went to. It could be how many degrees you have or certificates you have. Whatever. I want you to pick that. But I want you to kind of go in depth. And I really would like you only to pick 5. If you could do me that favor. Now, I know there's always one who says, nope, I'm not picking 5. I want to pick 6. Or there's like 7 of y'all who are going to have 18 slashes because you are connected and you can't figure out how to separate them. We'll just figure it out. So I'm going to give you like 2 minutes. I don't want you to take too long to pick those 5 for me. And then I'm going to have you do something else. If you have any questions, feel free to come off mute, but write down 5 and let's go from there. mix it up a little bit, Brian. You're good. I'm gonna run it again. Don't worry. But maybe about 30 more seconds. I don't want you to think too deeply about this, because if you do, then it's gonna throw you off. All right. I realize that was less than 2 minutes. So I will give you a little bit of time. I'm going to stop sharing my screen so I can see at least some of you. And is there anybody who needs more time? Okay. Did anybody enjoy the Jeopardy music? I'm doing my best, man. I know how long. I know sometimes these sessions can get boring or just random. So my goal is to make it random but fun. So, all right, here's the fun part. Do I have any brave souls that are willing to come off mute and share their 5?
I'll go.
Awesome, thank you.
So I just start going through my 5. Is that how we do this?
Just list them, yeah.
Okay. So I did geographic location, Midwest, gender, female, family role, oldest daughter / sibling in the family, education, University of Colorado, and then I said ethnicity, Iranian and Scandinavian.
Got it. Thank you very much, Paige.
Mm-hmm.
Anybody else? Who's next?
Sure, I'll go. I did profession, entrepreneur, founder, family role, father, husband, and I did education, USC, citizenship. I put born to first generation immigrant, and then age, which I think I'd be a Gen X.
Love it. Like how he didn't mention his age. Got it. Thank you. Who's next?
I can go.
Okay.
So for ethnicity, I put Indian American, education, I put law degree, profession, I put legal, religion, spiritual, I put Catholic, and family role, I put mom and wife.
Love it. Technically, you got like 7 on there, but I'm gonna let you slide.
What? That's 5.
Oh, because of the slashes, but I got you. I'm messing with you. Maybe a couple more people willing to share?
Sure, I'll go.
Okay.
Profession, software developer, education, non-standard education / like boot camp, geographic location, South Carolina, sexual orientation, gay, and age, millennial.
Love it. I love the what did you call it?
Non-standard education.
I need to use that. I like that. Non-standard. I went to like 5 different schools. So,
Yeah, I did a development boot camp, so it's.
Hey, it counts. That's what's up. Thank you. Anybody else want to share?
Yeah, I got a controversial one. I'm an able-bodied 28-year-old white male software engineer.
Why is it controversial?
No, it's completely not.
Oh, gotcha. I was like, I missed that one. Gotcha. All right. Thank you, Chase. Anybody else want to share?
I can go, Jesse.
Go for it.
I had ability. How confident do I feel in my areas of ownership? Responsibilities. What do I do that is kind of other than standard like work? Whereas you quoted making a difference or being better. Spirituality. That's kind of an external worldview, belief in like others or other faith. And then I had internal values, how I interpret what comes to myself, because obviously you judge like, good or bad, but those internal values are kind of forged for a long time. I only had 4, but that's all right.
That's all right. I appreciate you sharing that. Thank you. Anybody else want to go?
I can
I'll
go.
go.
Oh,
Let Madison go first.
I'm new, guys. I'm Madison. So I did gender, female, age. I don't know if I'm a millennial or Gen Z. I just turned 25, so I'm kind of in that awkward stage. And then geographic location, Midwest, and I said cold. And then for education, I did bachelor, but I got my yoga certification, so I put yoga. And then for family role, I did just youngest.
Dope. Is this like literally your first day?
Yeah.
Oh, welcome.
Guys.
I love that. Anybody else? There was somebody else. I'm sorry.
Yeah, I'll go. My ethnicity is German. I have a finance and philosophy degree. I am an accountant. My religion is Methodist, and I'm 25.
Word up. Thank you. Thank you. Dope. Okay, so I'm gonna ask you to share. I'm gonna ask more people to share. Don't worry, but thank you. So I love the diversity in the responses and people picking what they picked. Here's one thing I want you to do now. I want you to select two, any two, and then I want you to cross them off. Yeah, for those of y'all looking at me, yeah, cross it off. Someone's like, wait, what? All right. All right. For those of y'all who have crossed them off, the question now is, how easy or difficult was that for you?
It was easy.
Why?
I don't really, my nationality and geographical location doesn't really, I don't know, I moved around a lot, so not really tied to them.
Got it. Thank you. Who's next? Very easy. Thank you, Annie.
I'd say it's easy as well. Like it's just things that I feel define me less as a person.
Mm-hmm. Love that.
Mine was kind of hard. I crossed off first gen college grad and ex Southerner because those things aren't really like serving me currently.
When you say ex-Southerner, what does that mean to you?
I moved. I'm fully committed to being a Midwestern now.
Got it. Where did you move from in the South?
Texas.
Oh, well, we forgive you. That's okay.
Thank you.
No, I'm messing with you. So it's funny you said that. I was born in Mississippi and raised here, like moved here as a baby. And I always tell people, like, I'm from here, but I was really born in Mississippi. And that's mainly because of my parents. Even though they lived here and probably were here for over 20-something years, I got a mixture of the Midwestern, like, flavor family, but, like, in my house, it was Southern hospitality. And so I get people all the time, like, yo, where are you from? And I'm like, I'm from Minnesota. They're like, no, you're not. So thank you. I appreciate you saying that, Chloe. Anybody else? Was it easy or difficult, or how easy or difficult was it?
I thought it was kind of in between. I crossed out location and gender.
Okay.
The reason why I crossed out gender, which I was hovering on, was because for education I put women's college, and I was like, oh, that kind of gets that together.
Got it. Okay. Appreciate that. Anybody else want to share?
I thought easy, crossed out age because the older I get, maybe don't want to think about it. So identify, and crossed out education. I think, again, older I get, the more, less relevant it is to me.
Absolutely. That's real. Thank you.
So similar to Chloe, I crossed out location because I had Chicago as part of my identity, but I'm fully embracing living in the Twin Cities. And then also crossed out education as well, where I had liberal arts major because I feel like you learn something new every day these days, and even though that informs your background, it's kind of about progress.
Dope. Love that. Okay. One more. Anybody else want to share? One more.
I can go. I crossed out avocation and religion, spirituality. avocation, I mean, just, I identify as like a bicyclist or a climber or something, right?
Yeah.
That's just a hobby to me. It's not something that's tied to my identity so much.
Yeah.
Religion, like I'm kind of the opposite on that. I'm atheist, so crossing that's a big part of my identity. I don't go around like with it on my shoulder or anything, or like on a t-shirt, but
yeah,
like just in terms of how people judge people who don't have religion,
yeah,
it's like worse than like serial killers and rapists. They think people have no morals just because you don't believe in a higher power, and that's just totally not true. So
yeah,
that was a hard one to cross off.
No, I appreciate you sharing that. I have found more of my conversations of people that well, I guess feel the way you feel, but also have experienced what you just shared. So I appreciate you sharing that. Okay, those are good. All right, now I need you to cross off one more. The wonderful. So if everybody was off mute, I would hear the all the random grunts and stuff. I am going somewhere with this too. Just trust me. Cross off one more. So you should only have 2 left. Now, a couple different questions. Could be how easy or difficult was that for you? Can we get the list back? No. Bailey, do me a favor. Come off mute real quick.
Yeah, how's it going, Jesse?
Oh, what up? What do you need the list for? That determines if I put it up or not.
I just didn't write all of them down. I apologize. Okay. Our team's super busy, so not gonna lie, I'm doing a little bit of multitasking.
You're good. That makes sense. Yes, give me a second. Actually, if I could, I'm gonna throw them in the chat. I don't want anybody else to cheat. That's why. Don't ask me why they came out like that, but all right. You should be able to see them in the chat, and if not, worst case scenario, I'll throw it back up.
Excellent. Thank you very much.
Oh yeah, no problem. No problem. Okay, so question was, how easy or difficult was it? Why did you either cross those out, and some people shared a little bit, why did you cross those 3, or why did you leave the 2? So how easy or how difficult was it? Why did you either cross out the 3, or why did you leave the 2?
So this one was actually easier than the first 2, because the 2 that are left are the permanent ones of me, sexual orientation and age, versus profession. I could eventually move on to something else, but these 2 are more me.
Yep, love it. Thank you.
Yeah, I was going to say that the last 2 probably are the ones that define me the most out of the 5. So crossing off the 3rd was very easy.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, I'll agree as well. I crossed off education, which I feel like was important to me a few years ago, but now that I've got like work experience and stuff, it matters less. It doesn't actively impact kind of who I am.
Yeah.
I actually had a harder time. I crossed off able-bodied, and even though that's like, I don't know, more of an assumed thing, I was raised by disabled people, and I have many disabled folks in my family, so it's something I value, but other people don't view me through that lens. So it's hard for me.
Thank you.
Yeah, I thought it was tough too, because I kind of answered like in jest, but like very literally. But I was left with able-bodied and software engineer because of the 5 things, the other 2 being 28-year-old and white male. Those are the 3 things that are like facts about me. I picked to be a software engineer. I learned that, didn't go to school for it. So that's something that's like very like, I'm very passionate about and means a lot to me. That like that's something I chose for my life. And then able-bodied, even though I was born able-bodied, I'm also very careful and have never broken a bone in my body. So maybe that too. That's a part of my personality.
That could be true. I love it. Anybody else?
Well, since I put you all through the trouble here, I better answer. I crossed off family role. You know, it's something that I really thought was important to me, just throughout the past couple of years, and some things and positions I've taken to be able to assist others in my family. But you know, really, I know that each person can contribute in their own way, and I don't feel like that's as important of a role in the long term. I think as long as the family unit stays together, then that's what's important.
Love that. Thank you. Thanks for sharing.
Yeah, going off of that too, I crossed out family role too, because as the youngest, I don't think that makes up a lot of who I am, but the one that I did keep, oddly enough, was my age, because I feel like being so young and just like has really defined my life, especially now in work.
Yeah. Dope. Thank you. Okay. I appreciate you all sharing. So grateful. I hope that one, as we're hearing people share, you start to learn something that you maybe didn't know about another staff person, but as well, start to hear people and start to connect those dots. Maybe you have, maybe somebody says something that is, you know, that you resonate with. Maybe somebody says something that you never thought of. Maybe it's like a completely different perspective that you may even disagree with, but you're like, man, that's good insight. One thing that I have found in doing some of these workshops is that companies, no matter how big or how small, like almost to the perfect point of what Bailey did, and he jumped on, it was like, yo, we're working, we're doing these, we got these goals, we got these objectives, but we don't actually get a chance to talk outside of like our internal team. And so the hope, I know, is to like kind of spread and build like a cohesive culture, but also an inclusive culture. So I just always think, I love hearing these stories. I love being able to hear what people share and how and what is important to them. Last thing I would like you to do, cross off another one. So you should only have one left. And then when you get that one, if you wouldn't mind, you don't have to do this. If you could throw the last one in the chat. Throw the one that you left, that you did not cross off, throw that in the chat for me. Love it, love it. Family role was a lot. I love that. Geographic location, spiritual, father, therapist, family role, sexual orientation, yup. Ethnicity, ability, family role, education, late millennial, Gen Z, ethnicity. Yo, love that. Okay, so here's the part where we're always crunching on time, right? I want to hear for some people, like, what's, why did you leave your one? If you could do it under 30 seconds, just so we can get around and finish some of the content, it would be great. But this is actually the part that I love the most, is people being able to share. So tell me why you left your one. And then also I want to open it up for my people who are more introverted, less likely to just dive in and share. Hopefully you can see this is an inclusive community. So feel free, if you haven't shared anything, to jump into, and you're good. So why'd you leave your last one?
I'll kick it off. I put father, husband, and I think I left that because a lot of the decisions that I make in my life is where that's impacted as that role. So it's pretty sure.
Thank you.
I'll go. I put able-bodied because I've lived with a bleeding disorder my whole life, and I was only recently cured in the last year, so that's kind of a big impact.
Yeah. Thank you very much, Tony.
I put family role boy mom because I think when people say tell me about yourself, that's always the first thing I say, that I'm a mom. And also I think it's where I can make the biggest impact really on the future.
Yeah, love that. Thank you.
I put being a lesbian, and not that it like affects every facet of my life, but from the point of realizing it has affected my ability to be compassionate and like define how I view the world. So it's central to my being.
Yeah, thank you. That's real.
I put Chinese American ethnicity just because that's how I was raised, and especially moving to Minnesota, I realized how few Chinese people there are here relative to where I grew up, where I just saw everyone everywhere. So I don't know if I necessarily would have left that as my one had I been in a different geographic location.
Yeah, that's real. And a Minnesota thing too, for sure. What else? Who else we got?
I went with location. I had a really, really hard time. I was between that and ability. Ability just because physical and mental ability is really important to me, but I realized that could get taken away from me at any point in time. But my location, I'm Minnesota born and raised. That's not something that can get taken away from me, and I'm very proud of that. So that's how I landed on.
Appreciate that. Angel, go for it.
I put husband and expecting father. So my wife and I were expecting our first, and I love my father, but my dad's had 4 marriages, and there's nothing wrong with that, right? But I've also seen what it can do to families, right, when there is that level of complexity, and it ripples down to different generations. And so this new kind of shift for me has kind of become very evident in terms of like what my purpose is in terms of taking care of my family and wanting to provide them, not with what I didn't have, but just kind of more of a cohesive environment long-term for that.
Absolutely. So. Love
that. I put family role just because I'm really big on relationships too. I'm just grateful for my parents and kind of how I can lead by an example as a sibling.
Love that. Thank you. Maybe 1 or 2 more.
So I went with geographic location just because I have a very spread out family, and I feel like sometimes it's impossible to have roots in multiple places, but I really try my hardest, and I think it has defined a large part of my life.
For sure. Definitely. Thank you. One more?
I can go, Jesse. I chose avocation because it's, to me, that word is more present tense and growth focused. So it defines what I can keep doing now and going forward as responsibilities rather than feeling like I'm fixed.
I like that. Growth mindset. I like that. Man, that is awesome. Thank you so much, everybody who shared and those of you who jumped in the chat. There's no wrong or, again, no right or wrong answer. I think it, again, is one of those things where when you can hear what's important to people, some of you, found out some new information about people that you either never met or talk to all the time. Because, I mean, realistically, we live in this society right now where we don't talk, right? We have tons of leaders who have created this climate, I'll use that word, this climate where we don't have conversations, or there's certain things that you're like, I don't even know if we should talk about that. But also culturally, there are just things that are just not possible, right? In the workday, we all have some type of role, tons of family roles in there, tons of things that are important to us, and tons of things on our to-do list. And so while it is important for us to be able to hear and share these experiences and what are the things that are important to us, it also is still important for us to get our jobs done. And so I don't like to fault people for not having conversations, but I also like to create. I've just learned over time, one of the roles that I have is to be able to create community within people who know each other, who don't even know each other, or just to have those conversations. A lot of people ask me what are the 5 that I pick, and typically the first 4 are the same. So African American, father, middle class. I always forget what the other one is. So able-bodied is one that I go back and forth on because I too grew up with a family member who was in a wheelchair, and so it's something that I'm conscious about. But I probably notice it more when I'm around people who identify as not able-bodied more than anything else. And then and then being a male, that was the other one. And so I worked on a team of 5 women for about 2 years, maybe 3 years. And it was one of the best, probably professional development, untraditional professional development situations I ever had, because I was very aware that I was the only guy. I was very aware of my own kind of personality, and I'm kind of a take charge person. And I had to step back probably 95% of the time. And it taught me so much. I was able to see and observe. And then they gave me kind of signals, right? Of like, don't say nothing, be quiet, this isn't your job. And then it was like, all right, now it's time for you to use your maleness, jump in. And I loved it because it was like we all had our role to play. I was doing public speaking, and so they were like, yo, we'd love for you to go out, speak, you make the foundation look great. But then there were times when people would ask me questions like, oh yeah, that's not my job, I'm gonna send you over to these people. And so we all have these things that are important to us. I'm about to share my screen real quick, and there are, come on, get to it. All right, so there's these things called target identities and agent identities. Basically, target identities are when you feel like an outsider, when you feel like you've been marginalized, when you don't feel like you have access or power. And then agent identities, which is the exact opposite. You feel like you have access or resources or power, or you're on the inside. So target identities, you feel like you an outsider, marginalized, and then agent identities when you feel like you have power, you're an insider. What we know about members of underrepresented communities or groups, they tend to focus or be more mindful of their target identities and minimize their aspects of agency. I'll say that again. What we know about members of underrepresented groups or communities is that they focus or are much more mindful on their target identities and minimize aspects of their agency. So here's what this looks like. I am an African-American man living in Minneapolis at the epicenter of the protests and everything related to George Floyd, but also everything related to inequities. I have Black children, right? And I live 2 blocks from our local public school, but I don't send them there because of the inequities, right? It's a target identity because Minneapolis public schools, whether you love them or hate them, they have certain things that they are able to deal with and certain things that they're able to not deal with or not address. And unfortunately for me, is having Black kids, they don't address my Black kids as well as I would like them to. So I have to send them somewhere else. I also live in North Minneapolis, and so I told people earlier when you're jumping on, I get up at the crack of dawn because I need more time on my day. So I get up and work out and usually run somewhere around 3 or 4 in the morning. It's dark. There's nobody outside, but I'm running in my neighborhood, and I've been expanding the neighborhoods, and I feel like I have agency. Why? Because it's my community. It's my neighborhood. I bought a house 2 blocks from where I grew up, and so I've lived in my community or have become familiar with my community for years, and I'm in my 30s. And so it's something that I feel like I have agency. But when I go to another community that's not mine, or when I wanted to buy a house in Southwest Minneapolis and got redlined, I didn't feel like I had agency. I felt like I had a target identity because literally I got redlined, and the mortgage loan officer from Medina Realty was like, yeah, you shouldn't live there. Maybe we'll point you over in this direction, right? And so again, what we know is members of underrepresented groups tend to focus on those target identities and forget about our agency. There are situations where you may have felt like either you're number 1 or one of the 5 on your list. You might deal with the intersectionality of sometimes I have agency and sometimes I have a target identity. That is a real life thing. it's not necessarily about when does it happen, but how do we respond? And how do we share and give other people agency? So we don't have time to kind of do the sharing what those target and agency identities are for you. But the question that I want to challenge you as more of a rhetorical question is, how do you think that these parts of your identity or others present challenges or opportunities in your role? How do you think that the target identities and the agency identities present challenges or opportunities in your role? Now, you all listed, and this is why I'm kind of going back. You listed what your role is, or you've at least thought about it, what your goal is, how things will be different, and then how your soul is. There are things that we have that are part of our identity of being a woman, being a lesbian, being Chinese American, being a software developer, being a white male, being identifying as able-bodied or non-able-bodied, being a person of faith or non-person of faith. There are things that you identified that present challenges and present opportunities. I want you to think about what are those challenges and those opportunities. So what does this all mean? It's a whole bunch of stuff. And usually this is the part of the presentation where we can pretty much, if we were in person, I would ask you to answer that question and we would probably just kind of dovetail. But because I'm trying to be more linear, we're going to stay on task. I'm going to skip this part because there's some stuff related to that, but that's going to take us for about another 20 minutes. And I want to make sure, I'm a stickler for making sure I get you out on time. So there's this thing called adaptation, right? Before I even dive into adaptation, there's this thing called the Intercultural Development Inventory, the IDI. It's pretty popular in Minnesota and the Midwest, but it is the, what people would say, the premier cross-cultural or intercultural assessment that gives you a reading on where you think you are as it pertains to cultural competency and then where you actually show up in your behaviors. One of the stages on the continuum is called adaptation, where this is what adaptation looks like. You have the ability to shift perspective, or your behavioral code shifting, not actual code shifting, or you start to think as far as equity, what does it look like as it pertains to responsive policies and practices? So behavioral code shifting is basically when you are able to shift based on context, but you still keep yourself. You don't give up yourself. When you code shift, you actually kind of assimilate and kind of give up your internal being or parts of your being. So all of us, I believe, would like to get to this place of adaptation where we're able to culturally be aware, to be curious, but also to develop our own empathy and analysis, but be able to actually pay attention and keep your own cultural awareness. And then be able to shift depending on who you're talking to, depending on who you're engaging with, being able to ask those questions. It's like not having that odd, like, oh, I'm running out of things to talk about. It's like I'm engaging with people and I can actually dive in because I'm curious and I'm not kind of appropriating anyone's culture or language. So again, it's goal-oriented behavior. It's influenced by power dynamics and context and the natures of the relationships. So what being, and this is what I really want us to drive home, what being adaptive means is just being authentic. You have to understand that when you have a culture, especially as an organization, it is critical, it is imperative, basically, to authentically learning about culture and navigating in your organization. Much the same way we would find value in wanting to effectively navigate cultural differences in a new place we visit. Some of you talked about geographic as being something important. Some of you who have traveled, hopefully you have traveled recently, but it was safe. But like when you go places that you haven't been or that you would like to be, even if it's just in the hotel, you explore. You're like, oh man, they have this. Oh, this is, I wonder what's on the menu. There's like this posture of curiosity where you want to grow, you want to explore, you want to navigate cultural differences, but you want to be authentic. You want to be yourself. So you want to do that when you're being non-judgmental, and then have some type of bridge between a cultural difference. That's all it is. It's just being authentic. be yourself. So here's the thing. Here's the question that I want to kind of stop at. What are some of your challenges in being adaptive in intercultural situations? We all have some aspect of our identity that we have experienced agency and experience a target identity, but we also have challenges. So I want us to kind of end with talking about what are some of the challenges in being adaptive. What challenges do you have in being adaptive in intercultural situations? And then let's explore some of those strategies and support systems that you could use to help you. I'm going to copy these and put them in the chat. Don't worry. So the question is, what are some of your challenges in being adaptive in intercultural situations? And you might not know the question about strategies and support systems, but where are we at? What challenges do you have?
I think one of the biggest challenges I feel right now is just how to raise my boys to be a lot better than I was, just a lot more aware, a lot more like that they recognize they have privilege, that they can respond to it differently than I have. But the challenge is I'm learning. And so I know they're young and impactful right now. And I'm like, I've found some books and I've been just reading up on just ideas because I want them in their young minds right now to grow up with different, schemas than I was presented with. So it's not such a challenge for them and a big awakening as they are an adult.
Absolutely. One of the things that I think is so great about having kids, it's a pressure too, but like great, is they see the world completely different than we did or we do. And so being able to almost mirror or adapt or adopt their like childlike view of like, that's just a friend. Like they don't genuinely see like black, white, orange, red. They only get that language from us. And so being able to know like, man, they just want to play. Like kids just genuinely want to play and want to hug and want to be happy. Like, I love that. So thank you. What else? What else? What other challenges do you have or do you see? And I know this is a more difficult question. Somebody may not have been asked you this question before.
I think being perceived as being inauthentic when you're trying to be adaptive, feeling like you might not fit in even when you're trying.
Yeah. And do you think that, so let me ask you a further question. Do you feel like people have people said that to you, or you feel like that's an internal thing that you have dealt with?
I think it's an internal thing. Like people are open to other people joining in, but it's, still a worry.
It's present. Yeah, absolutely. Thank you.
Yeah, I think that's a really interesting point, especially we're seeing a lot with all of these social rights movements and stuff, and with the prevalence of social media and stuff. It's a really fine line between like virtue signaling and being genuine and causing positive change.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you.
This will be. Oh, sorry.
Sorry, go ahead, Tony.
Oh, okay. I was gonna say this is pretty vague, but for me, really just challenges that I have daily is just the ignorance of not knowing other people's experiences, but strategies is just continually being curious, asking open questions and listening. That as an example, some of my African-American friends were just sharing on social media the first time they had a gun pulled on them by a police officer. And some of them were saying, 12, some of them were saying 14. And seeing as I've never had a firearm pulled on me by a police officer, that was just an example of my mind being blown, but this was everyday life for them. So, just continually asking questions and not being assumptive, but listening, I think, is huge.
Yeah, thank you. Chase, go ahead.
Sure. Yeah. One thing I struggled with when I started at Branch was that we had some team members who were working remote, and oftentimes we'd have meetings in the office where they would join in via via PowerPoint or like presentation. And it would be like, 2 or 3 members out of a 10-person team. And for me, like, I always struggled with like trying to like, I feel like it was tough for us to make space for them. Like they were kind of an afterthought. And so one thing that I've really appreciated that has come out of COVID is the fact that now we're all remote and we all kind of have that experience that I think if we were to go back to working in the office, we could, we could make space for those remote workers.
Absolutely. That's a really good point. Thank you. And don't feel like you have to come off mute. If you want to throw it in the chat, that'd be great too. Challenges that may be coming up for you.
Yeah, I can go.
Let's go Andrew first.
You go, Blake. Blake, you go.
Okay. Yeah, I would say that was very nice of you. Thank you, Andrew. Challenges for me have been, for sure, just trying to get an understanding of what are some of those unknowns or some of those biases that you have and why, and trying to get a sense of how they came to be, and then obviously trying to figure out what you can do to understand whatever those other different groups may be, to how to understand how to adapt. So that's been a big part for me, is more thinking backwards into how did I get here and why.
Yeah, appreciate that, Blake. Go ahead, Andrew.
One thing my wife and I were actively talking about is we grew up in a very white community. Our immediate families are pretty progressive in terms of inclusivity and races and sexual orientations and ages and all that stuff. But in the extended family, when there's large family gatherings, there are individuals that there's racism just flat out there. And prior, it would be removing ourselves from conversations that made us feel extremely uncomfortable, but not engaging in confrontation. And now, kind of at the last few months, it's kind of like, how do we sit by and let that happen anymore? And so that's something that we're actively like trying to figure out, is like how we proceed forward with not being okay, idly kind of letting that happen on the side and not engaging in it, because that's not okay anymore. It never was, but it just kind of hit us in the face recently.
Yeah, oh, that's dope. That actually just reminded me of something that I was going to share that I just forgot earlier. I have a really good friend of ours, they're dang near like family. The white couple, they adopted 2 Black little girls, who are the cutest kids ever. What I appreciate about them, and I've learned more about their story. One, he's from Pittsburgh, she's from like northern Minnesota. And so part of that is like, he's just kind of got that East Coast, like just raw, which I love. It's like very direct. I'm a very direct person. I'm polite, but like, I don't really do the fluff well. So me and him connected really well, but his biggest part has been, or their biggest issues have been their family, like her brothers and sisters who also have adopted Black kids. And so you would think like, all right, the face that Annie's making, yep. Like you would think they would understand it, but they've dealt with so much internal stuff just in their immediate family. And so being able to have those conversations, deal with the confrontation, and they've almost come to blows. They've had like, yo, you know what, we're not gonna go up there for the 4th, which is like a big thing that they used to do. But also being able to have those conversations with other people who don't have the same background or don't have the same family dynamics, and be able to just get different perspectives. And so I appreciate you sharing that. I threw in the chat the last 3 questions that I typically ask, and they're pretty much the same type of question, but like, what resonated with you from this conversation? It's never enough time, so we know that. What resonated with you? What are some ahas or takeaways? And what's still lingering? I would love if you could just throw those in the chat. One, this helps Branch know like what should happen next. And so I did kind of strategically put those in there, but also for me, it's always good to just know where people are, still wanting to learn. Where's those growth opportunities? Where are those challenges? If we had more time, I would share with you a few different support systems and strategies that you can dive into. But of course, like everything, we got other stuff that we got going on. But this conversation has been good. I think another thing is getting outside. So one of the reasons why I do that exercise of the identities is for you to be more aware and more conscious of your own diversity identities, but also to be more aware of others. So just like kind of what Chase said is like, there's certain aspects until you are in it or on the other side of it where you're like, man, this works, but this doesn't work. I don't really know what to do. And then you get kind of forced and put into that situation where you're like, oh, got it. Or hearing stories of other people. I've had tons of friends who are not Black be able to share, or I've been able to share like our experiences of being in Minneapolis and dealing with the riots, right, and the protests, and just even diving into what's the difference between protests and a riot and looting, and helping people understand what it really looked like to live in North Minneapolis and watch 4 KKK members walk down your street at 3 o'clock in the morning with swastikas and guns. Like that actually happened. So for that 2 weeks immediately after George Floyd was murdered, I guarantee you I probably barely slept. It was the longest 2 weeks ever. Really great opportunities, but one of those things to help people understand, like you just don't know, right? Until we get to start having these conversations. I'm not saying that you should share your deepest, darkest secrets. If you decide to, that's on you. But I also think that as a company, if we're gonna grow, and I'm saying we because I feel like I'm part of the company, and I always use that language that's inclusive. If we are going to grow, if we're going to build, if we're going to expand, we have to do the internal work first, and that goes beyond any policy that can be created, any reprimand or any disciplinary thing that could or should happen. But we have to do the work internally. And I'll be honest, there are some people on this call that are not super excited about doing the work, and that's okay too. But we have to get to this point where we say, yo, I'm able to deal with my own stuff, or here's the level and extent of what I'm able to do. But also, I think if you love what you do and your role, which is why I asked you that question, if your role is to be a software developer, a salesperson, whatever it is that you do, you also have to understand what are the values that you align up with internally, but also what does the company align with. And I would hope and pray that you are part of a company or part of doing work, even in your own personal life, that aligns with your values. If not, I challenge you and I push you to do some self-discovery work and feel like, and see if you are in the right space. Nobody wants somebody who's not in the right space. It's not beneficial for anybody, because eventually you're going to burn yourself out, or you're going to burn out here. So I'm going to end there only because of our time allotted. I am way more than available. I got a whole bunch of stuff happening in some groups. I actually have a group that's meeting with just white guys, which it's a longer story to tell you about. But basically, I did some stuff around culture, and I had 22 women, or 22 people registered, 21 women, and one dude, which I love. Brave soul. But he was like, all the people were like, basically like, yo, where are the white guys at? Because to society, that's where the privilege and that's where the power lies. And so I put out a call, and then there was a bunch of random dudes that popped up, and it's grown to this list that was way bigger than what I thought it was going to be. But I said that to say, I think there are communities and opportunities for all of us to grow. We just got to find out where's our space, or be willing to just dive in and see what that looks like. So, I don't know, Adrian, Paige, am I turning it over to you? Am I continue? Tell me what to do.
Well, one, thank you so much, Jesse, for your presentation today and the engaging conversation. We will follow up with a survey to kind of get your thoughts on next steps for how we continue these conversations and take all these great learnings that Jesse has provided us on sort of how we want to continue those efforts at Branch. And we are going to start a diversity, equity, and inclusion committee to kind of keep these projects going in different ways, including hiring, internal education, and community engagement. So stay tuned for that.
Yeah. Can I add one more thing too, Adrian, before we go?
Yes.
So I know that there were 54 people, so I know people got to jump off, so I'm going to say it quickly. I know that you probably may get surveys and people that ask you their opinions all the time. What I do know from my conversations, like, these are people who really genuinely want to help, want to support, and want to make change. And so take the survey seriously. If you're like, this presentation was whack, say that. Trust me, I won't be offended. But I think it's important for companies and managing leadership teams and all that stuff to get real feedback from their own people so that they can make sure that they provide you with what the things that you want versus the things that you feel like that they feel like you need. So I just say take that seriously, and then also don't just rely on the company to do the work. Do your own work too.
The survey will be anonymous, so you can be as honest.
Yes. Thank you so much, Jesse.
Oh yeah, thank you. I appreciate y'all. Thank you so much. Feel free to reach out to me if you have other questions or throw those in the survey too. And I'm here to support. So I appreciate you. I hope y'all have a wonderful, wonderful afternoon, no matter where you are in the world.
Thanks, Jesse.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.